over criminal proceedings instituted by any person or authority, and to either continue these proceedings or discontinue them. And this is done especially or particularly by the director herself. The last one is to withdraw any criminal proceedings from any court of law, of course, apart from the court-martial. And this one also is the preserve of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
That is interesting. I note also that there are times when people try to resist withdrawing cases by DPP. What could be some of, and also some people start some criminal proceedings and they say Office of DPP should not, and yet it is the mandate of Office of DPP. What brings about this?
Well, there are a number of reasons as to why the Director of Public Prosecutions would be moved to withdraw proceedings from any court of law. Sometimes the director may get a complaint about a particular case that could have been handled by one of her officers, and when she calls for the file, she looks at it and finds that perhaps the evidence is not sufficient enough to warrant a prosecution. It could have been sanctioned in error, and so she may have to withdraw it. And then also, some cases are withdrawn in public interest. We have had scenarios where certain complainants or victims approach the Director of Public Prosecutions and they say they are no longer interested in prosecution of their cases. So the director looks into the reasons and she may be convinced to withdraw the proceedings.
But there are also situations where you get the local councils trying to get involved in the area of criminal justice. Yet I think most of their work is around civil. So how do you, what kind of awareness do you give them in order for them to know what kind of cases that they can handle and what kind of cases should go to the police and to the DPP?
Well, we also do sensitizations. We go out to the members of the public and sensitize them about the work that we do, about the nature of cases that we handle. Usually they're either criminal cases or civil cases in the justice system. And so we try to make it clear to them that there's a difference between criminal cases and civil cases. We handle criminal cases as the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And so, for instance, when we come by a case which is civil in nature, we don't proceed with those cases in the criminal court. If any of them ends up in the criminal justice system, that's an example of a case that, for example, would be withdrawn by the Director of Public Prosecution.
So what kind of cases fall under criminal justice and what kind of cases fall under civil, so that the public can know which case to take where?
An example of criminal cases includes crimes like murder, robberies, defilements, rape, theft, assaults. So wheresoever there is crime, it yields a criminal offense. Okay. And those are the cases that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions handles. Civil cases, on the other hand, involve disputes that involve land, family disputes like divorce cases. Those are the kinds of cases that are civil in nature. And those ones are handled by civil courts. And when it comes to criminal cases, it's the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions that represents victims of crime. And we handle them on behalf of the state. On behalf of the state. And that's why these cases are usually Uganda versus an accused person. So the Office of the DPP is the Uganda versus the accused person. When it comes to civil cases, these are handled privately. They are handled by private lawyers. The victims in those cases have to approach private lawyers to represent them.
Interesting. Now, another thing you said is that the office of DPP can direct, the DPP can direct the police to investigate. But in the normal interaction in society, at what stage does DPP come in? When somebody reports to police that a crime has been committed against him or her, and the person reports to police, at what stage? How does it move to office of DPP?
So what happens is that when a crime is committed, usually the victims of crime report to the police. And the police open up a case file, which they give a number or a case reference. Once they've opened up that case file, they begin to investigate the case. By investigating, I mean they begin to interview witnesses to get whatever items are related to the case, which we call exhibits. They compile the case file and then they submit it to the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions for perusal and guidance. When the case file comes to the office of the DPP, most times it goes to the head of the station in whatsoever area, who is called a resident state attorney. So this case file will be perused by the state attorney, and if the state attorney finds sufficient evidence to warrant a prosecution or to warrant that someone be charged with a certain offense, then the charges will be preferred or sanctioned against that accused person, a particular accused person against whom there is evidence. If the case file has been presented to the office of the DPP with a charge sheet, which is the document that has charges, let's say a rape charge, if the state attorney finds that there's sufficient evidence against that accused person to prove the case against that accused person, then the state attorney will just go ahead and write sanctioned on the charge sheet. If the file comes without a charge sheet, the state attorney will direct the police to charge the person. In other words, to prepare the charge sheet and present it again for sanctioning. Once a charge sheet has been sanctioned against an accused person, then the police present the case file again with the sanctioned charge sheet and the accused person in court. So the file comes to the office of the DPP, but the accused person is presented in court. And then the charge sheet is registered in court. And that's how the court comes by that charge sheet and comes to read it out to the accused person. Now, we also have cases which we call prosecution-led cases, or investigations which are called prosecution-led investigations. These are investigations which the office of the DPP gets involved in at the earliest opportunity, as and when the offense is committed. The police will inform the office of the DPP, and then we begin to direct investigations, to direct the police on what to do, what evidence to obtain. And these are usually big cases, high-profile cases, and the reason why we do this is so that very good evidence is obtained to ensure a successful prosecution and also to prevent unnecessary delays in investigations.
Okay, now there are also some terms which normally confuse us, bail and bond. Can you tell us what they are and how they can be obtained?
So bond is usually granted by the police. That's why it's called a police bond. And then bail is usually granted by the courts of law. Bond can be granted by the police upon arrest of a suspect for committing an offense, but before the suspect is produced in court. So the suspect may be released
by the police.
By the police, and this is usually as investigations are going on. And suspects are not expected to pay any money.
So
police bond
is supposed to be free.
Is free.
But in practice, is it?
It is supposed to be free.
I understand.
Now, when it comes to bail, which is granted by the court, it's applied for by the suspects in court. It could be orally or formally, that is in writing. And there are proceedings which the court goes through, or which have to be done before the court decides to grant bail. It could either be a cash bail or a non-cash bail. And usually, the court will require sureties, substantial sureties, before it can release a suspect on court bail.
Tell us about the presence of Office of DPP around the country, because at times the complaint is some cases seem to take long, so the public don't know where the issue is. Is it the Office of DPP not being present? Is it the delays in investigation? What causes all this?
I'll start by saying that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is a very big institution, and it has a head office, regional offices, and resident state attorney offices, as well as resident state prosecutor offices all over the country. The regional offices are currently 17 in various regions in the country. I'll mention some. We have Kampala, we have Nakawa, we have Mbale, we have Jinja, we have Soroti, we have Arua, Lira, Gulu, Mubende, Masindi, Kabale, Fort Portal,
Is Luwero one of them?
Luwero is newly created. It's a newly created region.
And Kampala?
Yes, I mentioned Kampala.
Okay.
And others.
That's
yes.
enough.
And also various resident state attorney offices all over the country. And members of the public are expected to go to these offices and regions as well as the head office in order to access the services of the office of the DPP. And the reason why these offices are spread out all over the country is to ensure that members of the public are able to access criminal justice all over the country. However, you will realize that we don't have offices in the entire country. There are certain areas where we are not present, and that is why we would have certain complaints about obtaining services. For instance, there are certain members of the public in certain areas that may have to travel long distances to reach a resident state attorney's office or a resident state prosecutor's office or a regional officer's office. And that is why we have some of these complaints.
So from your perspective, since you interact with the public, what are some of the common complaints you get in administration of criminal justice?
Well, we get complaints about the management of their cases. Some of them will come and complain about why a suspect in their case was released, because they expect the suspect to be in custody. Some of them will complain about the manner in which their cases are being handled. They're not satisfied with the way a particular officer, maybe in the office of the DPP or at police, is handling a matter. Those are the major complaints that we get. It's usually about that.
In case someone is not satisfied, can you try to paint a picture of complaints handling process by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions?
The Office of the DPP has what we call a streamlined complaints mechanism. And this is a process through which members of the public are supposed to go through in order for them to have their complaints addressed. And it's a bottom-up hierarchical process.
What does that
So
mean?
they're supposed to start from the bottom going up. It's an appeal process of sorts. So the first office that members of the public are supposed to go to when they have a complaint that relates to management of a case or the manner in which their case is being handled, or a complaint about an officer in the office of the DPP or a police officer and the way their case is being handled, is the resident state attorney's office or the resident state prosecutor's office, which is the station in their location, the office of the DPP station in their location. So if it is Makindye, there is office of the resident state attorney Makindye. So if the crime has been committed in Makindye and there's a complaint relating to that case file, the complaint should first be taken to the resident state attorney of Makindye. If the complaint is not addressed there or is improperly addressed, then the member of the public can take it higher by going to the regional office and therefore complaining to the regional officer. So in that case, it would be the regional officer of Kampala, because Makindye falls under Kampala region.
Okay.
If the complaint is not properly addressed at the regional office, then the member of the public can report to the head office. We have a complaints management office at the head office.
In Kampala?
In Kampala, at Workers' House. Yes. And complaints should be reduced in writing, in English, and they should bear the case reference, the one I talked about that is given from police. Should bear the case reference, facts about the case, and the particular complaint.
Now the English bit, isn't that not an obstacle in itself?
Well, members of the public always have a way of finding someone who can help them interpret their languages into English, and so they actually present them in writing in English. But also complaints can be channeled through our email address, official email address, and on the website.
Now, as you work towards reducing crime rate, I don't know whether you said crime-free or
A crime-free society.
A crime-free society. What are some of the practical things, really, apart from getting someone in jail having committed a crime? What are some of those things you do? What would be your communication to the public so that we don't get there?
I would advise the public to, first and foremost, be interested in knowing the law. It's important to know the law, to know what the law is saying about certain acts, so that they know what they should do and what they should not do as per the law. And then to desist from committing crime. Because the moment they commit crime, they will most likely end up in the criminal justice system, which is not what we want, and which is also not what they want. And lastly, to have integrity, to be people of integrity, to do what is right. When you do what is right, you're not going to end up in the criminal justice system, and you're going to help society. You help to build the society rather than destroy society and your country.
Now, one of the challenges of the business community is the challenge of fraud. Do we target creating awareness to some specific communities? Because when you're talking about people taking interest in understanding the law and what is expected of them and what is not allowable. And Smart 24 TV is basically a business channel, and there are some kind of crimes that normally are targeted towards the business community. One of them is the issue of fraud. Can you give some guidance on how they can protect themselves from being defrauded? Instead of waiting to first be attacked, it is better to prepare in advance. How do they protect themselves?
I would advise them about being very keen with their systems, because we are seeing that fraud these days is taking a new way of things. Technology is being used a lot. There's a lot of cyber crime, and so institutions need to be really careful with their systems. Who is in charge of their systems? How the systems are being managed, protection of those systems, ICT, and then also about employment. They should be very careful during the employment process, because we're finding that most of the frauds, a good number of the frauds, are being committed by inside people, people within the institutions. So the question is, how did they end up in these institutions? They were recruited. How were they recruited? How come it was not detected at the point of recruitment that these people were not the right people? Somehow they ended up in the institutions. So institutions need to be very careful during the recruitment process about who they recruit. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
maybe the other thing also that I'll add is, when an offense has been committed that relates to fraud pertaining an institution, it is important for the institution to cooperate with the police and to cooperate with the office of the DPP to bring the culprits to book. Because many times we have also encountered a number of cases, fraud-related cases, where institutions are not as cooperative.
That is right.
And we cannot win a case without the cooperation of the institution involved or the people involved. So we need their cooperation in order to win these cases.
Thank you very much. Viewers, we are still watching the Be Your Best show with Julius Torachi, your coach, and we are still with Ms. Jacqueline Okwi, who is Senior State Attorney and also the Public Relations Officer of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Let's take a short break and then we'll continue with the discussion.